You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein On Gelt Show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein On Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have once again on the Goldstein On Gelt show Dan Gainor, who's the director of the Business and Media Institute, which is a free market think tank. In the past, he's spoken to us about a number of kind of hot topics, and Dan, I'd like to talk to you about another one today. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back. I just wish I was there instead of here.
All right, next time we'll bring you over, I hope.
I'll try to ship myself over in a parcel.
You've been talking a lot about this, really what would appear to be quite a big controversy about the IRS targeting conservative groups for extra scrutiny. Before we go into some of the details, can you just give us the big picture about what's going on?
Well, the big picture is we've had a series of scandals happen lately that are dogging the Obama administration. But one of the first that really set itself apart was this report that the IRS allegedly only a couple IRS employees, and we've gone beyond that they were digging into or limiting the ability for conservative nonprofits to become formal nonprofits. They were holding up their applications. They were asking too many questions. They were saying things that were inappropriate. The scandal's gone beyond that, far beyond that at this point. The IRS itself is investigating, digging into at least 88 employees, I think the number I heard. It is widely acknowledged that they were targeting conservative groups, acknowledged even by the Obama administration. The situation here with the Tea Party, some of them were, that were targeted, literally gave up. It took them so long to get their applications through, they gave up trying. They were asked a lot of inappropriate questions. Some other conservative groups were asked inappropriate questions. One conservative media tracking organization applied under its name. I think a year and a half later, it gave up, applied under some touchy-feely left-wing name, and got approved in like a week or two.
Wow. So one of the things that I think a lot of the organizations that have been rejected are trying to say is that the Obama administration itself is behind this. Is that really true, or is it simply that there were some people in the IRS who were not being fair?
I don't think anybody knows yet. I mean, if you go back to some of the great scandals in history, and the one that right now people, I guess, are looking at for a lot of things is Watergate. Watergate started as a minor crime story. It took a long time to develop. What we know is that almost everything the IRS has told us about the scandal has been a flat and utter lie, that it's been proved to not just be a scandal of two employees in the Cincinnati office of the IRS. It's been proven to be employees in different offices around the country. Some higher-ups knew about it. The top-level people knew about it when they were telling Congress, dozens, or actually I think it was hundreds of times when they were telling Congress in some way, form, or fashion that conservative groups had not been targeted. In fact, they knew all along conservative groups had been. So to say I trust anything coming out of the PR office of the IRS at this point, no, I don't. And I don't think anybody does.
Okay, so is this an important topic in terms of the average American citizen who's not out there applying for 501c3 status?
Well, the idea that you can use divisions of the government to target American citizens is scary. It was one of the impeachment points against Richard Nixon. So it's something that scares even media people. But put in context, it's especially scary. Here we are in a situation where we find out not only is our government been investigating journalists, but now we find the NSA, who are undoubtedly listening in on this call, because I'll mention fun keywords like PRISM and Echelon.
Wait, I thought they were listening into this call because they like the Goldstein on Gelt show. Right?
Well, they also listen to international calls automatically, I think. But that they have also been monitoring the phone calls in various ways of Americans, to the point where when you put all these scandals together, that creates a very scary picture that people who are supportive of government security, and I know it's a big issue in Israel, people who are supportive of government security like I am, are bothered by some of the things our government is doing.
Do you think that the two actually are a fair overlap, the NSA listening to phone calls, and again, as according to their current claims, they're not actually listening to what you and I are saying, but they are scanning for keywords? Is that the same as right-wing groups being targeted by the IRS to not get 501c3 status?
It's a context. When you know that one division of the government is actively targeting people based on political beliefs, to look at another division of government and see that they have sweeping power to monitor everything you ever do online, your phone calls, maybe even your credit card purchases, your TV watching, your email. That is the kind of stuff that secret police units dream about. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that the KGB used to do. That's the kind of stuff the Stasi used to do, where they can build a profile on you if they want, detailing all of your friends, all of your contacts, emails you send them, things you say, personal problems you're having, work problems you're having, what you say about your friends, etc. That's daunting.
We are talking with Dan Gainor, who's the director of the Business and Media Institute. He writes a lot and he speaks a lot and he appears all over the press about a number of issues. Last time, Dan, you spoke to us about George Soros, and it appears that George Soros is also somehow connected to this IRS controversy. Could you explain how that is?
Yeah, it's not even just somehow. It's pretty prominently. When you go back to the origin of how this happened, what were the kind of touch points? Who encouraged the IRS to do this? It was a sort of agenda pushed by left-wing think tanks and some left-wing kind of quasi-journalism organizations, nonprofits, and a host of them that supported this are, of course, Soros-funded nonprofits. One of the most prominent of those is ProPublica, which is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalism nonprofit founded by left-wing pro-Democrat money, the Sandler Foundation, and also funded by George Soros. They were working on an investigation back in 2012, just as this IRS scandal was heating up, and they were pushing the IRS to investigate conservative nonprofits. They did 2 investigative stories about the issue. The first one detailed information about 2 right-leaning nonprofits, these political nonprofits, 501c4s. The next one mentioned 15 nonprofits, 501c4s, 14 right-leaning, 1 left-leaning.
Okay, so I see. You're noting on the bias, maybe one of the solutions here would simply be a much more free market approach where the government simply doesn't have its hand in a tax-free status at all, which would simply be to completely abolish the concept of the 501c3, because this is not the first time it's come into politics, and people from all sides of the whole political spectrum will always complain, well, why should this political group get a tax-free status, and why not the neo-Nazis, and why the left wing, or why this religion and not that religion? What if we just wipe the whole thing out?
Well, the problem with wiping it out, when you wipe out nonprofit status and you get rid of the nonprofit status for religious organizations, etc., I don't know who said it, but the quote is, the power to tax is the power to destroy. Once government can tax you, and I mean, we've got things written in our Constitution that says, Congress shall make no law respecting, for instance, the establishment of religion, freedom of the press, etc. When you create nonprofits, if government can tax those, it can tax them out of existence. It can create a new tax regimen that says, this type of group, just as it does right now, it says certain businesses might get a tax break and certain businesses don't. You could say you could say religious groups oh, they pay higher taxes. We don't like that. So we're going to make sure they pay 95% taxes.
I'm talking about the donations. In other words, if someone wants to donate to the Church of Scientology, why should they or shouldn't they get the ability to write that donation off in the same way that person would get if he donated to his local synagogue or church?
I actually think they can in the case of the Church of Scientology.
Yeah, so I was bringing that up because that's also a rather controversial church.
And it is, but I mean, when you get into, you get into an issue where when the government, by not giving it to them, then the government really is picking and choosing, much like Germany has done with Scientology. Germany's gone on sort of a crusade against the Church of Scientology.
Well, Germany today still taxes its citizens to pay the dues to their local church. So
exactly.
They really haven't separated church and state. But in the United States, this concept of separating, just separate it. Otherwise, there's always going to be special interest groups fighting, and this type of problem is going to come up over and over again because someone's got to decide who deserves the 501c3.
Well, but once you start taxing, then you are intruding in the freedom of religion. Once you taxing people's ability to donate to churches. And now there is a push, though, to do this. There both locally and nationally. A lot of local jurisdictions have developed procedures with different nonprofits wherein the nonprofits make contributions. I would use air quotes if you were using video for this. Contributions to the local governments in lieu of taxes. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a big issue. I think there's a lot of fear, particularly among conservative religious groups of both Jewish, Christian, any group that they might be targeted once the government gets involved in taxing those contributions.
But if they're getting involved,
they might be targeted for it.
If the government's okay, so now we're categorizing religion as one area. Let's assume that sits on one side of the room. But then there are these political action committees, like the ones that you're pointing out are being discriminated against. Why do they deserve? Why on either side of the spectrum? Why should they be exempt from taxes?
One of the issues you get into there is. The result of the 501c4 is the result of a Supreme Court ruling where government was limiting speech. And so they evolved. It's called the Citizens United ruling. And so government was saying you couldn't do certain things. The issue was produce a movie involving somebody who was running for office because they said that violated election law.
Wow.
So that got overturned, and that's the result. That's all these nonprofits has resulted from that. I'm pretty sure there's probably going to be further legislation and further court cases sorting all this out. I have no problem with saying that political nonprofits, that category would go away as long as the freedom to spend that money doesn't go away. And that's the key point.
What do you mean by that, the freedom to spend the money?
I don't think government has any right to tell me that I can't produce a book, a movie, a web video, or whatever close to an election that has a point of view.
Okay, so
that
with that, I don't have a problem. Again, it would bother me. As a libertarian, I would think that you would think that as much as possible, the government should be out of people's personal lives and shouldn't give incentives to donate money to political parties.
They weren't out of people's lives here. In fact, the government, with the McCain-Feingold legislation, the government really enacted kind of election speech codes. You weren't allowed to do certain things prior to an election that amounted to free speech. So that's what I said. I have no problem with the nonprofit status of these organizations going away as long as the free speech element does not. And that's what had gone away under these election legislation.
All right, so let's hear it for free speech, and free speech especially as people listen to the Goldstein on Gelt show. And if you missed Dan's last interview, be sure to download the podcast at goldsteinongelt.com or simply go to YouTube, look up Goldstein on Gelt and Dan Gainor, and you will find the previous interviews there as well. Dan, listen, we're just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, can you tell us how can people follow your work?
Oh, well, they can check me a couple places. Newsbusters.org is our organizational blog. I also write a bunch for FoxNews.com.
Okay. Dan Gainor, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.